in just 39 seconds. What started as a simple question about royal life turned into the most explosive meltdown ever witnessed on late-night television. Stephen Colbert, known for his quick wit and sharp interviews, found himself in a verbal battle that ended with Meghan Markle storming off his stage after being called out for contradictions that she couldn't escape. The cameras captured everything, and what unfolded was a complete unraveling that nobody saw coming. Before we dive into this unbelievable confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing the royal family's darkest scandals. Hit that subscribe button now because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Last night on The Late Show, Stephen Colbert welcomed Meghan Markle to discuss her latest projects and life after stepping away from royal duties. The audience clapped as she walked onto the stage wearing an elegant black dress, waving and smiling at the crowd. She sat down across from Colbert, crossing her legs and adjusting her microphone. Everything seemed perfectly normal at first. "Meghan, thank you so much for being here," Colbert said with his trademark grin. "It's great to have you on the show." "Thank you for having me, Stephen," Meghan replied, her voice smooth and practiced. "I've been looking forward to this." Colbert leaned back in his chair, holding his note cards. "So, you've been in the news quite a bit lately? New projects, new ventures. You've really been busy since leaving the royal family. Tell us what you've been up to." Meghan smiled and launched into her talking points. She spoke about her podcast, her production company, and her charitable work. She talked about finding her voice and living authentically. The audience seemed engaged, nodding along as she shared her perspective. "That all sounds wonderful," Colbert said. "But I have to ask, because a lot of people are curious. You've spoken extensively about your time in the royal family, about the challenges you faced. You've done interviews, a documentary series, and you've written about it. Some people are wondering, at what point do you move forward instead of looking back?" The smile on Meghan's face flickered slightly. "Well, Stephen, I think it's important to tell your truth. When you've been silenced for so long, you need to speak up." "I completely understand that," Colbert replied, nodding. "But you've told your story multiple times now. At some point, doesn't it become less about truth and more about, I don't know, keeping yourself in the headlines?" The audience went quiet. Meghan shifted in her seat, her expression hardening. "I think that's a very unfair characterization. I'm sharing my experience to help others who might be going through similar situations." Colbert raised his eyebrows. "Sure, but here's the thing that confuses me. You've said you wanted privacy, that the media attention was too much for you. But since leaving the royal family, you've done a primetime interview watched by millions, a 6-part documentary series, countless magazine covers, and now you're here on my show. That doesn't really seem like seeking privacy, does it?" Meghan's jaw tightened. "You're twisting my words. We wanted freedom from the tabloid press that was literally ruining our lives. That's different from controlling our own narrative." "But you can't have it both ways?" Colbert pressed, leaning forward. "You can't complain about media attention while simultaneously courting it at every opportunity. That's the part that people struggle with." The tension in the studio was building. You could feel it in the air. Meghan's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "I think you're being incredibly disrespectful right now. You clearly don't understand what we went through." "Maybe I don't," Colbert said calmly. "So, help me understand. You've said the royal family was cold and unsupportive. But then we hear reports from staff members who worked with you that you were demanding and difficult. There were stories about bullying allegations. How do we reconcile those two versions of events?" Meghan's eyes flashed with anger. "Those allegations were investigated, and nothing was made public. You're bringing up rumors and gossip as if they're facts." "The palace did investigate them," Colbert countered. "They just chose not to release the findings. That's not the same as saying nothing happened. And multiple staff members left their positions during your time there. That seems like a pattern." "This is ridiculous," Meghan said, her voice rising. "You invited me here to ambush me with tabloid nonsense. I thought this was going to be a respectful conversation." Colbert shook his head. "I invited you here to have an honest conversation. And honest means asking the questions that people actually want answers to, not just letting you repeat the same talking points you've used everywhere else." The audience was completely silent now, watching the exchange unfold. Some people looked uncomfortable, others seemed riveted. Meghan uncrossed and recrossed her legs, clearly flustered. "You know what?" Meghan said, pointing a finger at Colbert. "This is exactly the kind of treatment that made us leave in the first place. Nobody wants to hear the truth. They just want to tear me down." "I'm not tearing you down," Colbert replied evenly. "I'm asking you questions. There's a difference. And if you can't handle basic questions about your own public statements, maybe you should reconsider putting yourself in the spotlight so often." That comment landed like a bomb. Meghan's face flushed red. "How dare you? You have no idea what I've been through. The racism, the attacks, the lies, and now you're sitting here acting like I'm the problem?" "I never said you were the problem," Colbert said. "But I am saying that your story has some inconsistencies that deserve scrutiny, like the fact that you've complained about your life being invaded, but you've shared incredibly private details about your family relationships on global platforms. You've talked about private conversations with Harry's father, with his brother. How is that respecting anyone's privacy?" Meghan stood up abruptly, yanking off her microphone. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this. You clearly had your mind made up before I even walked out here." "Sit down," Colbert said, his voice firmer now. "We're in the middle of an interview." "No," Meghan snapped. "I'm done. This is a hit job, and I'm not participating in it." Colbert stood up as well. "It's not a hit job to ask you to explain contradictions in your own statements. That's called journalism." The tension had reached a breaking point. Meghan was visibly shaking with anger. The audience didn't know whether to react or stay silent. Some people gasped quietly. "You want to talk about contradictions?" Meghan said, her voice loud now. "Let's talk about how you sit here every night pretending to be this champion of progressive values, but the second a woman of color tries to speak her truth, you attack her just like everyone else." Colbert's expression hardened. "Don't do that. Don't play the race card to deflect from legitimate questions. I've been nothing but respectful, and asking questions is not an attack. The fact that you're interpreting it that way says a lot. It says that you're a bully," Meghan shot back. "Just like the rest of them." "I'm a bully?" Colbert said, his voice rising with frustration. "You came on my show. You agreed to this interview. And now, because I'm not throwing you softball questions and letting you control the entire narrative, I'm a bully? That's absurd." Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. "I'm leaving. This is completely unacceptable." "Let me ask you one more thing before you go," Colbert said quickly. "You've made millions of dollars off of telling your story about how terrible your life was. Book deals, streaming deals, speaking engagements. At what point does it stop being about healing and start being about profit?" That question stopped Meghan in her tracks. She turned back to face Colbert, her eyes blazing. "How dare you question how I make my living? We have bills to pay just like everyone else." "Bills to pay?" Colbert repeated incredulously. "You live in a mansion in Montecito. You fly private. Your lifestyle is not exactly relatable to the average person struggling with bills." "You don't know anything about our finances," Meghan said defensively. "I know you've signed deals worth tens of millions of dollars," Colbert replied. "And that's fine. Make your money. But don't pretend you're doing all of this purely out of a desire to help people. There's a financial incentive here, and everyone can see it." Meghan's hands were shaking now. "You're just like the British press. Nasty, cruel, and completely unwilling to see me as a human being." "I see you as a human being," Colbert said. "A human being who has made certain choices, and should be able to answer questions about those choices. That's what comes with being a public figure. You don't get to just tell your side of every story and then run away when someone challenges it." The word "run" seemed to particularly sting. Meghan's face contorted with rage. "Run away? Is that what you think I did? I removed myself from a toxic situation that was literally damaging my mental health. That's not running away. That's self-preservation." "Fine. Call it whatever you want," Colbert said. "But you're doing the same thing right now. The moment this conversation gets difficult, you're ready to walk off the stage. That's a pattern of behavior." "I'm leaving because you're being abusive," Meghan insisted. "Abusive?" Colbert laughed bitterly. "Asking you questions is abusive. Do you hear yourself right now? You've completely lost perspective on what actual abuse is." That comment pushed things over the edge. Meghan pointed at Colbert with a shaking finger. "You are a disgusting human being. Absolutely disgusting. I can't believe I wasted my time coming here." And I can't believe you thought you could come on my show and just spout your rehearsed lines without any pushback, Colbert fired back. This isn't your personal PR platform. This is a talk show where we have actual conversations, which includes disagreement. Meghan looked around at the audience, as if expecting them to come to her defense. Most people just stared back, unsure how to react to what they were witnessing. You're all the same, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Every single one of you. You build people up just to tear them down. Nobody's tearing you down, Colbert said, his patience clearly wearing thin. We're having a conversation, or at least we were trying to before you decided to turn this into a dramatic exit. This isn't dramatic, Meghan said, her voice rising to almost a shout. This is me standing up for myself against someone who is clearly trying to humiliate me on national television. If you feel humiliated, that's not because of anything I've done, Colbert replied. That's because you can't defend your own contradictions. You've told so many different versions of events that even you can't keep them straight anymore. Meghan's face was bright red now. That is a lie. I have been completely consistent. Have you, though? Colbert challenged. Because in your big interview you said one thing about your wedding. Then in your documentary you said something completely different. You've changed details about your experiences multiple times. Which version are we supposed to believe? All of it is true, Meghan insisted. Just because I remember things differently at different times doesn't mean I'm lying. So your memory is unreliable, Colbert said. That's good to know. Maybe that should be a disclaimer before you make serious allegations against people who can't defend themselves. The audience gasped at that. It was a direct hit and everyone knew it. Meghan's mouth opened and closed, searching for a response. You're twisting everything I say. This is exactly what they did to me in England. No, I'm listening to what you say and pointing out where it doesn't make sense, Colbert corrected. That's not twisting anything. That's critical thinking. Meghan grabbed her phone from her purse. I'm calling my team. This interview is over. The interview was over the moment you couldn't handle a challenging question, Colbert said. But sure, call your publicist. I'm sure they'll help you spin this into another victimhood story. That comment made Meghan freeze. She slowly lowered her phone and stared at Colbert with pure fury in her eyes. You know what? You're a real piece of work. You sit here on your throne, judging everyone, acting morally superior. But you're just a mean, bitter man who tears people down for entertainment. I don't tear people down, Colbert said, his voice steady. I hold them accountable. There's a difference. And if you can't tell the difference, that explains a lot about why you've had so many problems. Problems? Meghan repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You mean being racially abused by an entire country? You mean being driven to the point where I didn't want to be alive anymore? Those problems? The studio went deathly quiet. Colbert paused, considering his next words carefully. I don't doubt that you struggled. I'm sure parts of your experience were genuinely difficult. But you've weaponized that struggle to avoid any criticism whatsoever. Anytime anyone questions you about anything, you bring up the worst moments and use them as a shield. That's manipulative. How dare you call me manipulative, Meghan said, her voice low and dangerous. You have no right. I have every right, Colbert shot back. You came on my show. You're a public figure making public statements. I can call it like I see it. Meghan looked at the camera, then back at Colbert. Is this what you wanted? To make me look bad? To give everyone another reason to hate me? Congratulations, I'm sure this will be great for your ratings. This has nothing to do with ratings, Colbert said. This is about having an honest conversation. But you're incapable of that. You only want to talk when everyone agrees with you and tells you how brave and amazing you are. The second someone challenges you, you fall apart. I'm not falling apart, Meghan said, though her shaking voice suggested otherwise. I'm standing up to a bully. You keep using that word, Colbert said. I don't think it means what you think it means. Asking tough questions is not bullying. It's my job. And frankly, if you're going to keep doing interviews and documentaries and podcasts and everything else, you better get used to it. Meghan slung her purse over her shoulder. I don't have to get used to anything. I choose who I talk to, and I'm choosing not to talk to you anymore. Fine by me, Colbert said, sitting back down in his chair. But everyone watching tonight is going to see exactly what happened here. You couldn't answer simple questions. You tried to deflect and play the victim, and when that didn't work, you stormed off. That's the story. The story, Meghan said, practically spitting the words, is that you ambushed me with hostile questions designed to make me look bad. That's the real story. The questions weren't hostile, Colbert said calmly. Your reaction to them was, and that's telling. Meghan started walking toward the exit of the stage. The cameras followed her movement. She stopped and turned back one more time. You're going to regret this, Stephen. People are going to see this for what it is. What is it? Colbert asked. A character assassination, Meghan said. Plain and simple. It's only character assassination if the character you're presenting is fake, Colbert replied. If this is the real you, then I haven't assassinated anything. I've just shown people the truth. Meghan shook her head in disgust. You don't know the first thing about truth. I know that truth doesn't change depending on who you're talking to, Colbert said. And I know that people who are telling the truth don't get this defensive when asked basic questions. Basic questions? Meghan laughed harshly. Those weren't basic questions. Those were attacks. They were follow-ups to things you've said publicly, Colbert explained. If you consider that an attack, maybe you should reconsider what you say publicly. Meghan pointed at him one final time. You're a terrible person. Absolutely terrible. I hope you can live with yourself after this. I'll sleep just fine, Colbert said. Will you? Because it seems like you're the one who's upset right now, not me. That was the final straw. Meghan turned on her heel and marched off the stage, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. The audience sat in stunned silence as she disappeared behind the curtain. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. Colbert looked at the camera, then at his stunned audience. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, there was a loud crash from backstage. Everyone's heads turned toward the sound. Voices could be heard arguing, though the words weren't clear. Security personnel rushed backstage. The audience murmured among themselves, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Colbert remained seated, his expression unreadable. He shuffled his note cards awkwardly, clearly unsure how to proceed. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, a producer appeared from the side of the stage and whispered something to Colbert. He nodded slowly, then looked back at the audience. Well, he said finally, his voice carrying a mix of frustration and disbelief. I guess that's the end of that interview. Some people in the audience laughed nervously. Others remained silent, still processing the explosive confrontation they had witnessed. The cameras captured every moment, from Colbert's expression to the audience's reactions to the empty chair, where Meghan had been sitting just minutes before. Behind the curtain, shouting could still be heard. Meghan's voice rose above the others, though the specific words were muffled. It was clear she was angry with the producers, with Colbert, with everyone. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the studio. Colbert stood up and walked to the front of his desk. I want to be clear about something, he said to the audience and cameras. I didn't ambush anyone tonight. I asked legitimate questions that I believe deserve answers. If asking someone to explain their own public statements is considered an ambush, then we're in serious trouble as a society. The audience applauded, though it was scattered and tentative. Some people clearly agreed with Colbert. Others seemed uncomfortable with how the interview had unfolded. The divided reaction was obvious. We're going to take a quick break, Colbert announced. When we come back, well, I don't know what we'll do, but we'll figure it out. The camera cut away as the show went to commercial. In the studio, chaos erupted. Producers rushed around, trying to salvage the rest of the show. Audience members talked excitedly among themselves, pulling out their phones to text friends about what they had just seen. Everyone knew this was going to be everywhere by morning. Backstage, Meghan was reportedly refusing to leave the building until she could speak with the network executives. Her team surrounded her, trying to calm her down, but she was inconsolable. He attacked me, she kept saying. He attacked me on national television and nobody stopped him. Her publicist tried to explain that Colbert was just doing his job, but Meghan wouldn't hear it. She insisted that the entire interview had been a setup, that Colbert had planned to humiliate her from the beginning. Despite her team's attempts to reason with her, she remained convinced that she had been wronged. Security eventually had to escort Meghan and her team out of the building through a back entrance to avoid any further scene. As she left, she could be heard saying she would never do another interview where she couldn't control the questions. Her team ushered her into a waiting car, and she disappeared into the night. Back in the studio, Colbert returned from the commercial break. He decided to address the situation head-on, rather than pretending it hadn't happened. "Look, I know that got heated," he told his audience. "But I stand by everything I said. When someone puts themselves in the public eye to the extent that our previous guest has, they open themselves up to scrutiny. That's how this works." He continued, "I have nothing personal against her. I don't wish her any harm. But I also can't sit here and pretend that there aren't valid questions about her behavior and her statements. That wouldn't be honest, and it wouldn't be fair to anyone." The audience gave him a standing ovation, whatever mixed feelings they might have had during the interview. It was clear that most of them respected Colbert for not backing down. He had asked the questions many people wanted asked, and he hadn't folded when things got difficult. As the show wrapped up, clips of the confrontation were already spreading across social media. Within an hour, hashtags related to the interview were trending worldwide. People were divided, as expected. Some praised Colbert for holding Meghan accountable. Others accused him of being unnecessarily harsh with someone who had been through trauma. The debate raged online through the night and into the next morning. Think pieces were written. Cable news shows discussed it. Everyone had an opinion about what had happened and who was right or wrong. The interview had become exactly the kind of cultural flashpoint that dominates the news cycle for days. In all the chaos and commentary, one thing remained clear. Meghan Markle had walked onto that stage expecting a friendly conversation where she could promote her projects and tell her story once again. Instead, she encountered someone who wasn't willing to just nod along. And when faced with that reality, she couldn't handle it. She had stormed off the stage, unable to defend herself against basic questions about her own public statements and actions, leaving the audience and millions of viewers at home to draw their own conclusions about what they had just witnessed.